And so, as we deal with this session here, of course, session three, dealing with communication in marriage, and what I always call a critical session, because a lot of people really struggle with communication in their marriage relationship. And for the most part, we learn that communication, or I should say, the communication style we bring with us is what we've learned in our parents' home growing up. And a lot of times that can be good, but many times, unfortunately, we bring a lot of bad habits with us. And so, as usually I take couples through this process, I say, hey, anything that you have, you can keep that. But anything that we identify that can be bad, of course, discard that and continue to build upon that good. And this is probably the first session where I allow couples to do a lot of the talking. And so, first of all, I typically start with trying to get an assessment from them as to how well they feel communication is in their marriage. Many times I'll ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, to rate how they feel communication is in their marriage. And then from that point, just trying to get them to voice any issues or concerns that they think that they may be dealing with in their marriage relationship in terms of uh, the inability to communicate as a whole, or to feel as if there's certain things that they have to hold in that they can't communicate, or whatever the case may be, but just getting some feedback from them. And then I'm going to skip excuse me, skip this slide here, which deals with, you know, more of our stuff in terms of the marriage disciples. But really coming to understand that, again, communication is the key to any good relationship, because we have to be able to not only disclose the problems and issues that we are dealing with, but again, allowing those things to be able to be placed on the table so that we can deal with them in the first place. And you can probably, oh, I see she broke them down here. So the two objectives we're going to deal with here, first of all, is how do we listen in a marriage relationship, learning the difference between listening to defend and listening to respond. But also, again, how do we maintain that positive communication in our marriage? Coming to understand that there are no individual winners and losers in our marriage, especially in communication. That again, that if one lose, we both lose. And a lot of times, again, of course, because we have not had the proper tools for effective communication, it's relearning how we should communicate in the first place. So, again, with communication being that good key, it's important to understand that communication is always also a two-way street. You know, a lot of us have been conditioned to believe that good communication is that ability to express one's thoughts, feelings, wants, needs, and desires. But effective communication, good communication, can only take place when we're also willing to listen to the thoughts, feelings, wants, needs, and desires of our spouse as well. Again, therefore, making communication a two-way street. And it's kind of like the old adage that God gave us two ears and one mouth because He wants us to listen twice as much as we speak. And there's a lot of truth in that. So a lot of times we're so concerned with the things we want to get across, and failing to take in consideration the things we need to listen to on behalf of our spouse. But you could probably go to Barnes and Nobles or get on the internet and find out the ABCs, the one, two, threes of how to have effective communication in your life. But what we found is that there's only three main things to remember, and that's honesty, charity, and empathy. First of all, honesty. Always allowing for a platform to exist where one or the other can come and say, this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is what I need. And not only that ability to come and be open and honest, but also allowing the platform to exist where they feel the comfort to come and share those things. And that was one of the things I really violated in our marriage relationship in the beginning, because, first of all, Julie came from a family where she never saw her parents argue. So for her, an argument meant that you were heading down the path of divorce. And so she avoided it at all costs. And two, for those times when she did feel some sense of comfort to come to the table and express something, I would always belittle it or criticize it or ridicule it by saying something like, "Well, but you shouldn't feel that way," or "Wow, well, if you really want me to understand what you're saying, you need to say it this way." And I always had something to criticize where it just pushed it further and further away from the table. And again, we want the honesty to exist, because if the honesty is not there, we can never deal with the realities of the marriage relationship. And then that's when deceit starts to kind of creep in. And a lot of times not intending to be deceitful, but just feeling that, hey, for one, I can't come to the table, or when I do come to the table, it ends up in disaster, so I'll just stop. And Satan loves to take that deceit of those things that we fail to disclose and twist them and distort them into all kind of things. Now, as we are communicating with each other, many times we kind of grow to the point to where we are hearing and we stop listening. And I guess a good example would be that, about a year ago, Julie and I moved, and we are in the flight path of the airport. And, many, many times during the day, you hear these planes zooming over. And after a point in time, you hear them so much on a daily basis that you just kind of start to tune them out, so to speak. And in fact, we had some friends over a couple months ago, and we're sitting on the back patio, and all of a sudden, this big UPS plane flies by, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, what is that noise?" And you guys deal with this all the time. And we're like, "What noise?" Because we've grown accustomed to hearing the sound of the planes. And I think many times in a marriage relationship, we grow accustomed to hearing the sound of our spouse, that we hear them, but we're not really listening. We start to tune them out, so to speak. And so we have to go back and really focus on listening to each other in the marriage. And there's two ways to listen. We can listen to defend, or listen to respond. And listening to defend is when we, again, from this competitive nature we have, whenever our spouse starts to speak of something of a negative nature, it puts us on defense. We stop listening, and all of a sudden we're starting to build a rebuttal for what we feel we're being ridiculed or criticized by of the other person. And so listen to defense can sound something like this. Um, when Julie and I made the decision to work on our marriage, she came to me one day. She said, "Look, if we are to continue this marriage, and if you want me to be in a good place, you have to stop communicating with Karen." Now, Karen was a female that I dated when I was in high school. And Karen and I kind of maintained a friendship or relationship even through mine and Julie's marriage. And it was a threat to Julie. And so when she came to me with this request, I could either listen to defend or listen to respond. And listening to defend would have been something like this: why should I give up this relationship? Karen and I are just friends, strictly platonic relationship. We don't see each other. We talk on the phone or we send emails every now and then. Why should I have to give up this relationship for you? But instead, thanks be to God, I listened and responded. And my response was simple: it's a done deal. That if me having a relationship of any sort with Karen threatens you in our marriage, I don't need it. In fact, I don't even have to call her back to let her know that we won't be communicating. And just end the story. Because when we allow honesty to exist, as Julie and I have now, whenever she or I comes to the table with a statement or request or whatever the case may be, we know that we're not saying it to test each other. We know we're not saying it to elicit a certain response. We're saying it because it's a reality in my life. It's what's on my heart. And if we love each other the way that we say that we do, then whenever we find the other person is feeling less than for any reason, our response as a loving spouse is to remove that, to take it away. So, again, just as in the example I gave. Now, the second point is charity, speaking in a warm and loving manner. And that can be kind of exemplified in this way, where I could come home from work and Julie could say, "God, Greg, you know what, man? We got the 5 kids around the house, and you're like kid number 6. Every time I turn around, your socks are all over the place, your underwear is on the dresser, dirty clothes just everywhere. You're just one big slob, and I wish you could just clean up after yourself." Or she could say something like, "Sweetheart, I try real hard to keep the house clean around here, and all these kids running around. And you know what will really help me out? When you come home from work, if your clothes are dirty, throw them in the hamper. Or if they're clean, hang them up in the closet. You have no idea how much that would help me out around here, and I would really appreciate it." So again, two different ways of expressing the same thought, but with the latter being more charitable. Because when people speak to us out of charity, one, we're more inclined to listen, and two, we're more apt to respond to what it is that they're asking. As opposed to when someone speaks to us in an uncharitable tone, our immediate response is we get on defense. We start, defending whatever it is that we have to say, and we're just ready to brace ourselves for that big blow, so to speak. But again, the charity just seems to take all of that away, and it keeps the atmosphere civil, so to speak. And then empathy for those times when we do lose it, so to speak, or find that the other spouse has lost it. Instead of giving them strife back, take just a couple moments to put ourselves in their position to see what it is that they're feeling and how, and I should say maybe what is the reason they're feeling that way. So if I come home and find you in a bad state, they'll just start thinking, okay, well, wait a minute, how was her day today? What did the kids do today? Or what did she experience to put her in that mood? Whatever the case may be, instead of coming and giving her additional strife because I see that she's copped an attitude, so to speak. So again, honesty, charity, and empathy are those three main points to remember that will allow for us to have good, honest, effective communication within our marriage. Because, it is our marriage relationship where we should feel the most secure in expressing our innermost being. It's where we should be totally transparent. In fact, if you go back to Genesis 2 and they speak about naked without shame, and many times, because we find that Adam and Eve ran and hid from God, they sewed on fig leaves, that they were speaking in terms of the physical aspect. But in reality, there's no aspect in our marriage in which we should feel as if we cannot be open, totally transparent, totally vulnerable in marriage. And so communication allows that to happen, allows it to take place. And this is another reason why the prayer is important, because the prayer starts to allow for that openness and vulnerability to be had again, especially many times that you're dealing with marriages that are in trouble, that they have lost that. They're not able to open up and share themselves. And so the prayer kind of begins to be that act that begins to foster that ability to do so. But then of course following through in your daily communication, and which helps that to continue and to grow in the marriage. Now, when you are communicating, um, the experts say that in an exchange of communication, the actual words that we speak only, only makes up 10% of the message being communicated. 30% is in our tone of voice, and 60% is in our body language. So what that means is that 90% of what we're communicating in terms of the message has nothing to do with the actual words. It's what the tone that's coming out of our mouth, as well as what is our body language saying. So, in other words, are we sitting there looking intently in each other's eyes, giving each other that undivided attention? Or do we have the newspaper or magazine in front of us, or the remote control scrolling through the channels on cable? And again, our tone of voice. Yeah, yes, I said I love you. God, will you get off my back? And so again, it's that tone of voice matching those words that are coming out of our mouth. So we have to be cognizant and remind our couples to be cognizant of what is your body saying that might be contradicting, or what is the tone of your voice that might be contradicting the actual words that are coming out of your mouth. And again, it's like everything else in marriage, it's all about being a gift of ourselves to the other person. And so, really remembering that when our spouse takes the time to come and share something to us, with us, that it's important to them. And whether we want to agree with what they have to say or not, it's our responsibility to go outside of ourselves to keep them in a better place and not make them feel like they're an idiot or stupid for something that they have to say. Again, just simply because of the fact that they said it means that it's important to them. And this, of course, requires us dying to oneself, going away and remembering that it's not about you. It is about what it is that they want to express, but more importantly, how we die to self to accommodate the other person. And so just remembering those two things as well. Um, a lot of the issues that we sometimes run into with couples where they're experiencing different difficulties is that they're listening to the words instead of the meanings. And a lot of times, because we come from two different environments, we may have our own understanding or meaning of a word contrary to what our spouse may have. And so a lot of times it's just a difference in understanding of sometimes the words that are used that misconceptions start to take place. A lot of times we fail to validate the other person. And again, that's just simply how we receive what the other person is saying. Whether, we are openly receiving it or criticizing it or putting it down or just simply not validating the other person and what he or she has to say. Or a lot of times we start to micromanage, down to the nth degree, everything the other person is saying. Or, again, a lot of times the misconceptions are assuming what your spouse means, or ignoring a comment or a request that the other person is asking. But kind of going back to assuming what your spouse means, a way to eliminate that maybe sometimes is incorporating what's called active listening. That when our spouse says something and it seems to kind of ruffle our feathers and put us in that place of defense, instead of running with that, take a moment to say, hey, now if I understand you correctly, when you said XYZ, you meant blank. And that way we can give the other person opportunity to either acknowledge that what we're saying or what we believe that what they were saying is true, or it gives an opportunity to correct the misconception. Oh no, not at all. That's not what I meant. This is what I meant. Or they come back and say, well, yeah, you got it right. That's exactly what I meant. But a lot of times additional strife enters into the marriage relationship because of something we thought that the other person is saying. So again, at that moment, we can kind of activate the active listening aspect that gives us an opportunity to know full well if what the other person said is what we believe they said, or what it is, giving them the opportunity to correct what it is that we believe that we heard. Another thing that we instruct couples to do on a daily basis is what we call couch time. And that's simply taking 5 to 15 minutes when you come home together from that evening after work and just kind of reconnecting with each other and literally taking a time sitting on the couch. If need be, excuse the kids from the room to allow them to know and understand this is your time. And this is pretty critical because you're also teaching them that mom and dad's time is important. And so hopefully they're watching you model that for them so that when they grow up that they begin to duplicate what they've seen. But again, that's simply a time where you come together and maybe offer notes of appreciation for maybe something that the other person's done. Discuss new ideas or things that are coming up in the marriage relationship. Be able to vent complaints or frustrations that you might be experiencing. But more importantly, it's a time of prayer of thanksgiving. You can be praising the other person for something he or she had done throughout the day, or whatever the case may be. But just taking that time to come home, to kind of diffuse from the day, and just kind of quickly catch up with each other before you kind of reintroduce to the kids, of course, if you have them. And so the couch time can be critically important. And that's something else that just kind of carries over too to the once a month date nights. Always encouraging couples to at least once a month be going out on a date where they're spending that intimate time with each other, um, discussing, as we always call, matters of the heart. No school, no homework, and things of that nature. But again, the realities of the marriage relationship. Now, just as we have those top three things, the honesty, charity, and empathy, there's also these things I call rules of engagement, things that you want to be sure to continue to incorporate in the marriage. And the first one is to use I statements as opposed to you statements. Because even if we're not wagging our finger in the face of the other person, just utilizing the word you implies that you're doing so. And for whatever reason, it always puts the other person on defense. And a way to kind of soften that but still get your point across is using I statements. And a good example of this is the fact that Julie comes from a home where her father was very sarcastic, always cracking jokes and making fun of the other person. And she would even say that sometimes it was a funny way of them displaying how they loved each other. I, in turn, came from a home where my father was very mentally and verbally abusive. So I don't take being the butts of jokes very well. And it was something that Julie would always do in the course of our marriage. And instead of me confronting her, I would just kind of store that inside and kind of retaliate in this passive aggressive kind of way, if you will. But on this particular day, she was just on a roll. Just a dig here, a jab there, just back and forth, back and forth. And finally, on the way home, I turned to her. I said, "Why do you do that to me?" She said, "Why do I do what?" I said, "Why do you put me down like that in front of other people?" She's like, "What are you talking about?" And so for the first time in our marriage, I turned to her and I began to share with her. And I used the words. I said, "You know what? I feel like a kid when you speak to me in that sarcastic tone. And the reason why I feel this way is because when I was growing up, the way my father would speak to me as well. And I said, and every time you do that, it takes me back to that point when I was a little kid and it hurts. And so, again, utilizing that statement or that model that's on the right side of the slide, I feel or I felt like blank when you say or did blank. And I feel this way because, and then expressing the feeling, it hurt, it upset me, uh, all those different things because that's what we're trying to get across to the other person, those things that hurt us. And again, we should not intentionally try to hurt the other person. And even in our ignorance, those times we fail to understand, giving them an opportunity to come to know and understand those things we say and how we say it, they may cause hurt and pain as well. Point two, express feelings in words and not actions. And this was another area where she was perfect in doing, so to speak, because there'd be many times when I come home and I find her in the kitchen, slamming the cabinet doors, slamming the drawers and all those different things. And I know in full well that she's upset, but she's not expressing it in words. But instead of me being the gentle man and going to her to see what is going on, I would typically go in the den and turn on the stereo or the TV to counter the noise that she had coming out of the kitchen. And it was juvenile to say the least. But again, it's what a lot of people bring with them in a relationship because they never had the tools to approach it righteously. And so instead of just coming to the other person and saying, hey, you know what? Obviously you're upset. Is there anything that I've done? Anything that the kids done? Anything we need to discuss? And giving the other person an opportunity and maybe even an invitation to come and express what is on his or her heart. Point three, avoid stockpiling. And this again is staying away from continuously holding in, if you will, those things that we have issues or concerns with, but not addressing them. So, say for example, you can say, well, things are pretty chill right now. I don't want to cause any static, so I just won't say anything, and we'll stuff it. And something else happens, and we say, well, I just want to keep the peace, and we'll stuff it. And many times, unfortunately, we continue to stuff all of that stuff, and what we fail to understand a lot of times is that then the anger and the resentment and the bitterness starts to grow each and every time we stuff those things and don't deal with them. So again, avoid stockpiling altogether. And instead of waiting for them to build up, because typically what happens, they'll build up and one thing will finally happen that'll light that fuse. And all of a sudden, this big explosion erupts, and there's just stuff all over the place to be dealt with, and it becomes almost impossible to deal with it, which is why we should also deal with one issue at a time, and not only one issue at a time, but one issue at a time when they happen, and that way we kind of nip things in the bud. And Julie could say something, and say, "Okay, right there, sweetheart. When you speak to me that way, that upsets me, that hurts me, or whatever the case may be." But dealing with them when they happen, and not pushing them aside or sweeping them under the rug or stockpiling. I was working with a couple in marriage prep a couple weeks ago, and she was talking about that. Her grandmother used to always say, "Yeah, sweetheart, if you keep sweeping that stuff under the rug, one day you're gonna trip over it." And a lot of times that's exactly what happens. We've been kind of holding on to that stuff, and it continues to build, build, and build until we do, in a certain sense, trip over it. Point five: avoid hitting below the belt. And this is just simply staying away from words or things that we know that we could say that's going to cause hurt and pain to the other person. And I always invite couples to think for a moment, what is the one thing that you could say or do that when said or done will just tick the other person off to no end? And we all know what those things are. And just as we can say or do the things that moves a person in a negative disposition, we can also say or do the things that's going to put them in a positive mood as well. And I also utilize this to kind of express the point that we cannot change the other person, but we can indeed impact change in the other person. So again, just as we know those things we can say and do to move them in a negative light, we can also say and do those things that's going to keep the atmosphere positive in a relationship as well. And then the other is avoid generalizations, and that's staying away from words like always and never. Again, there's just something about those words that when used, they puts the other person on defense. So say, for example, I could have forgotten to take out the trash this last week, and Julie comes and say something like, "God, you never take out the trash. I can't believe you." And so, what do you mean I never take out the trash? I've been taking out the trash for the last 8 months, and all of a sudden, one Tuesday I miss. How can you say never? And there are always, and like I said, just something about those words that moves the other person in a negative disposition. And number seven, I kind of lump these three together: eliminate sarcasms, criticisms, and accusations. I found that sarcasm is just a funny way of saying what it is that you really feel. It's like instead of joking and poking fun about it, again, just simply invite the other person to the table and say, hey, can we talk about this? Same thing with criticizing. There's never a need to outright criticize anybody, but especially your spouse in the marriage relationship. Again, it does nothing but damage to the relationship. Again, if there's an issue or concern, just address it and bring it to the table. Same thing with accusation. Those things just sting when you outright accuse someone, especially your spouse in a marriage, of doing something. And many times you later come to find out that you were wrong in the accusation in the first place. Hey, Julie, you see my keys? No, I hadn't seen them. Well, I put them right here on the dresser. You must have taken them. I know they just didn't grow legs and walk away. What did you do with them? And lo and behold, I go and find the pants that I had on the day before, and they're in a pant pocket. So again, just simply staying away from those accusations. Again, if there's issues or concerns that need to be addressed, then we can just again invite the person to the table to talk about those things. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is to allow for virtuous communication to be had in a relationship. And this can only take place when we start to value the other person whom we're speaking with. And in a way that when we articulate our message, it's in a positive, favorable, respectful tone. And so, therefore, always look for reasons and opportunities to praise your spouse before voicing a complaint. Um, a lot of times for this, I use Revelation 2 in the book of Revelations, of course. And in this particular chapter in Revelations, it's one of the letters that Christ had written to the seven churches. In this case, it was the church of Ephesus. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it says something to the fact that, I know your love for me. I know your desires to do righteous things. You've even cast out people who have come to say that they're in my name, but they are not. But you lost your first love. And you need to go back and do the things you did at first to win my love. And so in this situation, as I was reading the scripture one day, I told you, I said, man, this is a perfect way for addressing issues and complaints in the marriage. Because typically, man, we just explode and run over our spouse with the things we don't like. But what you find in this model here, Christ didn't do that. First of all, he praised and built up the in this case the church of Ephesus. He said, I know your love for me. You've done great things in my name. But then he came back and then offered, what the problem or issue was. And then he gave the resolution. So there was an edification, a stating of the problem, and then posing a possible solution. And so that's a good way to be able to address the issues and concerns, building the other person up with praise first, with positive words, then again, noting the issue of concern and offering a possible solution. Point two, practice the golden rule with your spouse. Um, and of course, it applies with husband and wives, but again, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Just a simple thing. If you want your spouse to speak to you in a nice, charitable way, then you speak to him or her in a nice, charitable way. Point three, find one new thing to praise your spouse for every day. Experts say that we should always say um, 10 positive things to one negative, but it's usually just the opposite. The We'll say the 10 negative things, and the one positive we do have to say, we typically don't say it, we just kind of keep it to ourselves. But if we start to look for at least one thing every day to just kind of praise your spouse about, to pick them up, to lift them up, and keep with that good disposition, because that's also conducive to good communication as well. Point four, many times we have couples go back and to kind of get in the mode of thinking about positive things is to make a list of all the positive things that you like about the other person. And and exchange that list, and got to keep it handy to refer back to on occasion, because it seems like we become forgetful when we need to express those things that we do like about the other person. And point five, refuse to get into a shouting match when you disagree. Again, it does no good for the marriage relationship, and especially when we do it in front of the children. And it's okay to allow them to see that sometimes we do have disagreements, and we're not going to agree on everything because we're two different people from two different places, but also being able to demonstrate to them that we can also find resolve. I think a lot of times we set our kids up for failure as well by allowing them to think that marriage is going to be this great, happy, holy thing, nothing ever goes wrong relationship. But again, allowing them to see and understand that yes, there are disagreements that take place, there are troubles. But in the midst of those troubles, we don't just run away from each other. We don't throw away the towel. We don't disrespect each other. But again, we work to find a resolve. And so, just allowing them to understand the realness and reality of what marriage brings. But that's kind of it in a nutshell on the communication. Um, I'm not even sure if Graciela has sent you the two exercises that we normally share with couples. And one is healing past communication eras, which is kind of like the forgiveness and healing exercise. It has a series of statements that couples can go through to kind of take a look to see how they might be violating communication in their marriage. And it gives them an opportunity to kind of self correct as well as apologize for those bad habits. But more importantly, learning from them to be able to go forward to allow for honest, effective communications to be had in the marriage. Any thoughts or questions or concerns?
Hi, Greg. It's Lisa. I didn't see any communication exercises from Graciela.
Okay, I can go back after the call here. I'll just get those out to you. But I know there's a couple different exercises that we share with couples. There's also a new exercise I'm working on that really kind of gives you additional words to utilize when dealing with couples in this situation as well. As when I was talking about the using I statements, I feel like, and it has several different categories of words that you can use to express those feelings. Again, and expressing them in a charitable way. So I'll get that to you as soon as I complete it as well.
And the other question I had, Greg, was Graciela mentioned that you might talk to us a little bit about the inventories.
Yeah, I was waiting for everybody to get that. Initially we were working with Dr. Hillary Towers, who's friends with Scott Stanley with Prepare and Enrich Life Innovations, and they were going to help us kind of start charting and maintaining a record of success. And that's not really panning out the way that we had hoped. And so we started talking about whether or not we should do those. And I think what we
Okay.
had decided to do was leave it as an option for the couple because it is an expense that the couple would have to incur on their behalf. We make no profit on those. That's just a straight pass through to Life Innovations. And so I think what we decided to do is just leave it on the worksheet for the couples that are in need of help to determine if they feel that they want to pay for that and have that additional assessment. And as you notice, for those of you who have received them, it's a pretty good tool in indicating areas where there might be some problems or issues. And so I love it. I use it as an option with the couples I'm working with in the discipling, but it's not an option for those who are doing marriage preparation. It's a must because as they're starting out, we're trying to uncover any potential hazard that might be plaguing the relationship. So, and they're pretty much self-explanatory, but we can have a session where we specifically go through each one of those areas on that inventory and kind of talk about how do you approach them, in terms of things that are critical issues that need to be addressed, and more importantly, again, just identifying those areas in which they really have conflict and bringing those to the surface. But we'll do a special session specifically for that.
Okay. And on the ones that we completed, will we get like our results in writing or something via email or?
Yeah, that's what
Uh,
I thought you would have received it because everybody that has taken them, I thought Graciela sent them back because we get the reports back, and they come in two forms. They come. They used to not get one for the couples, but they do now. So there's one for the couple and there's one for the facilitator as well. So let me make a note here for her to get that to you guys.
Yeah,
Chris,
we did get ours. We got ours, Craig.
okay,
Chris and Raquel did.
okay. So yeah, Lisa, let me check with Raquel and see if she indeed has sent it. Whatever the case, I'll make sure she resends it so you guys can get that.
Yes, thank you. That would be awesome.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Appreciate it. And anything else?
Nothing here.
Okay.
I'll just ask, moving forward, Greg, are we going to try to continue with GoToMeeting or?
Now, I was just explaining to these guys before you came on, Lisa, the fact that we have a learning management system that we've been using, or that we identified that I'm using right now, to start putting the training online, and that way, all the couples can access it at their leisure. They can go through it as fast or as slow as their schedule permits, and I think it's going to be a great tool for accommodating the many couples. Because I know one of the things that it would be frustrating for me to actually go through a session and then it's 4 or 6 weeks later before you're getting to the next session, and
Okay.
as consistently as we can do that, I think the better. So I appreciate your patience in this piloting process, and of course that's what the piloting process is for, us to learn, what are the best practices, the best things to include, the things to get rid of, and how to best do things. And I think that's gonna make things a lot easier. So we'll be back. We're in Houston right now after a presentation last night, so we'll be back this weekend, back in the office first thing Monday, and that's priority for me is to get that done because you can only imagine as we've been doing these series of talks, the people that have been coming to us that are in need of help. Um, we were in Alabama, I think Wednesday, Thursday night, and there was probably 30, 35 couples present, and three-quarters of the couples came up to us afterwards, just lamenting about the different issues. And
Wow.
so the need for the marriage discipling process is going to be huge. Which I'll also say this as well, and it's probably critical for you and Clay, Lisa and Clay, is that we're looking at maybe creating that parish model again. I've had about 5 parishes within the last 4 months come and request having marriage disciples in their parish. 3 of the parishes specifically wants a marriage preparation component as well. And so maybe there could be some kind of option we put in place. I still like to talk to your pastor there to get some feedback from him, but looking at having both, again, marriage disciples on behalf of Alexander House, as well as having marriage disciples, a cadre of couples in their respective parishes as well. Uh, and we just want everybody to get this information and use it. As you know, the hurt and pain is out there. I'm sure you could probably think of 2 to 3 people right now in your circle of friends that are in need of help. And the more people we get
Yes,
out there,
I can't stress enough how quickly Clay and I are trying to get this done because of, what we're witnessing around us. And Father Don is thrilled to have it. And so, I can't, our desire and our happiness that you guys are here for us and willing to train us and provide this, it's really huge. It just really is.
Yeah, and we have had people that have reached out to us too for help.
Right.
and that's one of the things you find,
Yes.
especially as you guys have been conducting the covenant of love and the date night component there. People start to see you as kind of the marriage people, and you'll become that go-to couple where people are looking for help.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Greg, if you don't mind, could you tell me a little bit about the Marriage Challenge? Because I really don't. I'd like to know more about that.
Okay, here, let me stop the recording real quick, and I'll continue that part.
You turn the mic down.
Well, maybe I can't stop it. I'll just keep going. Back in 2008, Julie had this idea where she wanted to get a bus and just literally just travel the nation doing what she called a Great Marriage Challenge. Of course, she had her heart attack in 2008. We just kind of tabled that. Well, this year, around February, we had a trip to D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. And the response was huge, not only for couples wanting to know more about marriage, but couples wanting to know more about the marriage disciples process, the covenant to love, and everything else involved. And so we thought, well, let's look at kind of resurrecting this Great Marriage Challenge. And all of a sudden, we started getting invitations just all over the place. So instead of flying back and forth to all these different places, we thought, well, let's just group them all together and let's look at getting a vehicle and let's just kind of create a tour. And so we started doing that. So this first one was just only about 10 days, but we'll be out pretty much all the month of August and September, probably in that 8 week time, probably 7 weeks of that is going to be spent out on the road through the Midwest. And like our next tour, we'll get back tomorrow, but we'll leave September 10th for, I think it is Wichita, Kansas, and go Wichita, Oklahoma, Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado, Arizona, and back through El Paso. It's crazy. And so even on our website, there's a part that's under the heading "The Challenge." You can read more about the Great Marriage Challenge, and it also has a tour schedule, which now needs to be updated because Teresa Tomeo has been talking about it on her show in the last 2 weeks, and we're getting booked. It's crazy, but we in Julie style or fashion, she started creating this schedule. We had like 3 weeks, 3 months of tours scheduled, and we didn't have a vehicle. Long story short, we had about 5, 6 people come together and donate enough money for us to purchase an RV that we're traveling in with our 5 kids, and we're going to all these different cities, towns, churches, and presenting talks, workshops, speaking at conferences, and everything on this Great Marriage Challenge. So we'll probably do 4 or 5 of these a year. Where we're out on the road anywhere between 3 to 6 weeks at a time each time. So again, it makes it critical to get this training program in place and train other couples to have them available to accommodate the load that we know that will be coming as a result. So that's the short version.
Okay, I'll definitely read more about it on the website. And, I have a personal question for you about our upcoming retreat. If you want me to we'll hang up from here and I'll call you on your cell.
Okay, we could do that.
But you know what? We can just jump off. I mean, I think we're probably at the end of the formal session if y'all want to go ahead and do that. So
Okay, well we could do that in that way because I guess it looks like I have to have everybody off to stop and save this session.
Okay, why don't we just all drop off and then we'll jump back on the conference and wait for you to open it back up.
Okay.
So you want me to call your cell, Greg? Either
Yeah.
one.
We can just
You just call me on the cell. That'd be best.
Okay, so let's call them ourselves. That'll be fine.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
And like I
thank
said,
you all.
we hope to have this shoot up a little bit better and facilitate it a lot easier as we go.
No, this is great. Thank you, Greg.
All right, thank you guys. Have a great win. God
We'll
bless.
see y'all play, Lisa.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Bye bye.